Story 1. I would say lack of purpose. A lot of what has been mentioned here, such as depression, suicide, and disaffection, most likely stems from feeling unnecessary. Or at least it is one contributing factor. Story 2. Economics. My grandfather didn't graduate high school but was able to support 6 children, a wife, buy a home, and have a pension. I graduated from college and make significantly more than most Americans, but I still can't meet his standard of living. Story 3. There is a lot being done to break down the stigma of men's mental health, but there is still a perceived value decrease for men who express emotions outside of situations deemed appropriate by others. Story 4. Loneliness. As a man, I'm okay with being alone for the most part, but everyone wants to be seen, heard, and loved. I feel a lot of men will claim that they don't care, but deep down everyone wants that connection. This, in return, feeds the depression. Story 5. Social conditioning tells us we can be anything we want, only to release us into a system that alienates us. It leaves men vulnerable to poor mental health, feeling like failures, and trying to fit themselves into a restrictive view of what a man should or shouldn't be, wondering why following the rules they were given to be successful didn't pay off. This leaves them vulnerable to isolation, lack of socializing, suicide, and exploiters preying on these feelings to sell them a bogus self-improvement course. I think a lot of men would have benefited from some simple honesty when they were growing up and maybe being taught useful resilience tools for adversity in their futures. Story 6. Economy. I swear most of the time when I hang out with my buddies, they will either talk about money, politics, the economy as a whole, wars, and bragging. Story 7. Poor social skills. Improving social skills makes it easier to find better friends, have more fulfilling friendships, ask for help when you need it, find better relationships, and find jobs. Story 8. The fact that we get told that our feelings matter by people who really couldn't care less. We get told that not talking about our issues is considered toxic masculinity by the same people who think that merely saying "open up" is some kind of magic spell that will all of a sudden make it easy to do just that. Don't you think if society truly cared about our emotions or we felt like it, we would? Story 9. I started going to psychiatry. It was going well until I started explaining more of my trauma and problems. My psychiatrist got uncomfortable with me and they discharged me because they want their staff to feel safe. Story 10. Only getting intimacy from sexual intercourse. I'm convinced most men just want a hug or to be held most of the time rather than have sex. But that's not how men are supposed to be. Story 11. Actually getting help for our mental health. We are brought up in a society that tells us that our natural state is dysfunctional, which makes it even more difficult for a lot of men to realize that there is actually a problem. Why don't men seek out help during mental crises? We've been conditioned to believe that the symptoms we experience are normal. We minimize our crises because it is not on the same level as other people who we see as worse off and struggling. If we realize the issue is as big as it is, we don't want to burden someone else with our problems. We tend to think even professionals who are paid to help us will see us as a burden because our piteous issues take time away from people with more serious problems. And if we acknowledge we need help, we often are treated like we are broken, which is detrimental to the psyche that has been built up to believe the appropriate function of a man in society is to be intelligent and able to solve problems. That somehow men are supposed to be paragons of logic and repair. To be broken is to not be a man by the standards set by the conditioning society puts on us from early grade school or even before school begins in some cases. Story 12. In my opinion, the biggest problem affecting most men today is that, from a societal perspective, men are considered very sexual beings. This is heavily reinforced by the media since sex sells. From my experience, most men get so caught up in sexual gratification that there is never any room or space for being close or intimate with any friend. As a result, men are often really lonely in our society because we place such an emphasis on sex when making friends. Hanging out with a girl? Oh, he wants sex. Getting close to a guy? He must be gay. Hanging out with the guys? It becomes an obsession to talk about every girl that walks by. It's so frustrating that sex is placed at the top of all intentions. It's even more frustrating that, for the majority of guys, it's true. I just wish guys weren't so obsessed with sex. Sometimes myself included. I feel like men would be much happier if they could control it. This is coming from a straight guy, by the way. Story 13. Probably the new financial landscape makes it so many full-time working men are barely able to afford an apartment. Home ownership for many men is considered a duty. Story 14. There are many problems that affect men, but some of the most common include mental health issues, relationship problems, and financial difficulties. Some of the most serious problems facing men today include mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 6.7 million men in the United States suffer from depression. In addition, anxiety disorders are the most common mental health problem in the United States, affecting 40 million adults, or 18.1% of the population. Relationship problems are another common issue affecting men. According to a study by the Pew Research Center, 61% of men said that being a good husband or partner is one of the most important things in their lives. However, men also reported higher levels of stress in their relationships than women. In addition, men are more likely than women to experience marital problems and divorce. Financial difficulties are also a common problem for men. A study by the Federal Reserve found that 47% of men said they worried about their finances, compared to 32% of women. In addition, men are more likely than women to experience job loss and poverty. Story 15. I'd say loneliness and boredom. I feel empty right now, and I'm an absolute outcast in my area. I've been here for 13 years in a tourist town, and the locals are elitists who want nothing to do with me. Lack of affection and intimacy is another issue. We don't ask for much, just to simply improve our mental health. Story 16. I talk to most of my guy friends. Sometimes it happens that even our own mothers do not understand us and believe that our problems are insignificant. It's very sad. Story 17. Married 10 years, 5 kids, no friends. I have nothing to talk about my problems with. I have no time to do anything. I'm putting on about 5 pounds a year, and I've just stopped caring. Here's to dying a slow, quiet, lonely death. Story 18. Men can experience a suffocating and soul-sucking emptiness from just existing in modern society. They say men build civilization and have privilege because of their general standing based on ancillary evidence, but that amounts to nothing. Not a day will you ever hear a compliment that is without an ulterior motive. You will likely never be praised or given a compliment, even if you go out of your way to put on a smile and do good, do those things for others. There is a tangible and palpable coldness, which is even felt in the humanities of being a teacher or a first response person. You will never feel warmth or comfort. You are only measured by the material wealth and worth you create at large. Even family or spouses will gauge your creative skills, hobbies, or other value as a person against what you can produce. No one will see you or what you do, except if you are lucky and manage to become wealthy. Even then, you will be actively sought after only for what can be taken from you. Men's responsibilities and what society actually provides for literally everyone else are grossly imbalanced. Even as a parent, no one will trust you, the man, to do anything, even if you are literally doing more than the mother. Oh, and don't be a father in the West because you are automatically labeled a creep or pedophile if you try to be a good father on a playground or take your child out alone. You only win if you are successful, and people will only respect you if you are absurdly wealthy. It is an abyss, a deep void that can only be escaped if you're lucky to have good family with a partner who actively supports you every day. Story 19. I don't know if it's the biggest issue, but I have one: the lack of community. Fraternal organizations are now deemed toxic, outdated, and sexist. There are very few spaces where men are able to be together without any women present and not be judged for it. If a woman demands entry, she's portrayed as an intrepid pioneer, fighting against the vast, powerful patriarchy. No, Emily, it's just a group of men who want to play pool and darts for a while without being bothered. There are lots of spaces where women can be together with no men present, and it's seen as important sisterhood. If a man demands entry, he's considered a weirdo or creeper. I'm not saying spaces exclusively for women shouldn't exist. They should. Spaces just for men should exist too. Story 20. My entire family is dead. My mother is dead, My father is dead. My dogs are dead. My grandparents are dead. I was homeless as a teenager, worked difficult jobs, ended up working in a research lab and became the lead author of a paper. I will never own a home. I have engineer friends making more than $100,000 who have tried for years to buy houses just to have the rug pulled out from under them by BlackRock and other investment companies. There is no point in participating in this nation if you will never own a home, start a family, get health care, or retire. The biggest problem affecting men today is the fact that they can't afford anything because all the wealth was funneled to a parasitic cabal of so-called elites. Story 21. That I don't have feelings or that my feelings don't matter. That I can't be insecure. That real men don't cry. That I should always make the first move. That I should always take the lead. That I should like sports. That I can't take photos of my daughter in public without some women wondering if I am a pervert. That women expect me to pay for everything. That I should be above 180 centimeters for a woman to swipe right. But I can't say I want a woman that is below 70 kilograms. That I am expected to pay for the first date. That I get a harsher sentence because I am male. That in a divorce I can't get custody because I can't possibly take care of my children. Just some of the issues I have seen online and in the world. Story 22. I think mental health and the response to men's mental health is critical. Men continue to be vilified because of the rampant increase in reported sexual assaults. Men don't report their abuse mostly due to shame, and if men do come forward with any issues regarding their mental status, they're labeled as weak. And the retort to these issues is almost immediately, women have it worse. Honestly, it would be nice to actually be listened to. But it seems the only time men's mental health is ever taken into consideration is when we have to bring their body down from the noose. Story 23. I would say online dating is primarily affecting men negatively, but the complete destruction of the middle class is probably the big issue, even though it affects everybody. Life isn't supposed to be this hard. You're not supposed to need to make 6 figures to buy a home. You're not supposed to need to go 6 figures in debt to go to college. A routine medical procedure is not supposed to bankrupt you. This is a catastrophe. Over the past 20 years, housing prices, education prices, and medical expenses have all more than doubled. The problems and the reasons are overwhelming, but they all lead back to our government protecting the right to profiteer above all others. I knew a bunch of people who got their homes burned in the wildfires. The amount of bureaucratic red tape they've had to endure just to rebuild the same house in the same place is insane. Ordinary people trying to build ordinary houses are stifled by a suffocating miasma of bad socialism. But if you want to buy a house as an investment or buy a bunch of houses for cash to drive the price up in a whole neighborhood, that's made easy. That's capitalism gone bad. So we have a government that's split liberal and conservative, and people get hurt by both sides. We have socialist protections for medicine and prescription drugs. You can only practice medicine with a medical degree, and you can only sell a drug that has attained Food and Drug Administration approval. But, in a predatory capitalistic way, we let a private institution control the distribution of medical degrees, and they constrict supply while charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for admission. The Food and Drug Administration charges very high fees for its drug approval process, which restricts supply, but then does nothing to control costs. Again, socialist policies and capitalistic policies working together to hurt everyone. My preference would be pure socialism. You want to build a house, the government provides a free service of surveying the property for safety, environmental impact, etc., and widens the roads. Or you want to become a doctor. Apply for the free National Medical Academy. Since being a doctor is a legal distinction, the process of becoming a doctor could be handled socially as well. I'd also prefer the pure capitalism approach. You want to build a house out of giant Legos in a tree? Go for it. No regulations for sprinklers, deck rail spacing, stair height, etc. Dig a cave under your property for a second unit. For medicine, are hospitals too expensive? Go to a radiology clinic in the mall where some technician with an X-ray machine will tell you if it's broken for a low fee. But we have the worst parts of socialism and capitalism ensuring we have very little freedom or security, colluding to make it brutal to prosper but oh so easy to stay rich. We really have to fix this. Story 24. that my value as a person is directly linked to my ability or inability to provide for others. It seems more noticeable as I get older. It feels like women I meet to potentially date are judging me on my ability to take care of them financially. I usually find the same women are into women's rights and feminism. They want a traditional relationship but also want to play the sexism card whenever it benefits them. The double standard is ridiculous. I think this is why we see so many younger men choosing to not get married or have children. There's no upside anymore. Story 25. I think of it as living in the ruins of our father's castle, having to deal with a different place in society than our forefathers. It's not a bad thing, but adjusting to it is not always easy, especially when it is still in view. My grandfather was the head of his household, a patriarch, and it seemed the entire universe revolved around him. I don't think he ever did anything you could consider domestic. My dad is a lot more laid back, more of a partner to my mom, not as much help with the kids, more of a work and funny stories guy, does house chores, has always been the cook. Then there's me, much more sharing and partnership with my wife, more active with the kids starting from birth. I cook, I clean, I do chores. Just trying to be equals. It's not a nice thought, but it feels like I can only see the outline of my grandfather's lifestyle. I don't have the purchasing power, a house, 5 kids, multiple cars, an airplane, all on a single income. Actually, both of my grandfathers lived like this. The other grandfather had all of that and horses and a boat. They both had multiple residences at one point. I make, in monetary terms, much more than my grandfathers and father, maybe even combined. My relative standard of living is lower. But someone doing what I do now back when my grandfathers were my age, I'd make them look poor. The world doesn't revolve around me. That's okay. But it's hard to come to grips with all this. From fast cars and airplanes to a person with a minivan in 2 generations. Dealing with this existential crisis and the toxic male culture at the same time is hard. I know, cry me a river, right? But we aren't allowed to have that emotion either. The time to mourn something that should definitely stay dead. And through all that, you can see why the toxic masculinity of yesterday has such allure. Regain your standing and power. Maybe this is all just screaming into the void.